What we have here is something called the Wealth Building Potential Calculator. It's something I've probably shown to clients, I don't know, 1,000 times, and every time I show it, I still get something out of it. It's a really impactful, awesome tool, and what it's here to show is how much wealth can one build over time. And there's a lot of variables, as you can see. We can look at different study periods, income, so don't get too caught up in the numbers. This is just the concept to grasp. But what we're looking at here is how much income could one theoretically create over their lifetime. We're using a 35-year study period here. Again, we can change the numbers around, but that can relate to maybe a 30-year-old couple compounding wealth, building wealth for 35 years until retirement. And if, let's just say, they were to earn $250,000 as a household, over that 35-year period, this last bar reflects how much all of their paychecks would add up to. All those days driving to the office or working hard, the total income, $250,000 per year in year one for 35 years, assuming income was the same every year for 35 years, which of course it would never work that linear, but let's just say that did occur, there'd be $8,750,000 of total income created. But what usually happens? People get pay raises over time, right? Typically, people make more money, even just to keep up with inflation. Sometimes it can be a lot more than 4%. Sometimes it can be less. But an average that is fair to use is typically around a 4% pay raise per year. So when we recalculate this chart now, assuming this same couple started with a household income of 250,000 and their income rose by 4% per year, you can see that now they've created $18,413,000 of total income over their lifetime, their total wealth building potential. Really large number. And when I look at this, one thing I take away from it is, wow, that's a lot of money. Where does it all go? Why are we having such a issue in our country with people having enough to retire? Is it an income issue or is it a money management issue? Like, what happens to that income over time? And something I like to think about is when you reach that end game, you want to be able to look back and say, wow, all that work I put in, all that income I generated, I did intelligent things with it and I have something to show for it. So where does that money go over time? There's some things we can't avoid, right? Like taxes. Easily between income tax, the IRS can wind up taking 40% of our wealth. Again, we're using some random numbers here, but that 18 million, 11 million now in our pocket, 7.3 million went to the IRS. What about debt, mortgages, student loans, car loans, etc.? Not saying all debt is bad, but just to be aware, it's easily something that can take close to a third of the average family's wealth in America today. And all of a sudden that 18 million, 5 million at the end of it all, with money going to the IRS, money going to the financial institutions, and then lifestyle. Hey, we're not saying never spend money. We're not saying never enjoy wealth, but we have to be aware of lifestyle and going out to eat, buying new things, traveling, all great stuff, but easily can then consume another 25% of all the money we make. And what you can see happen here is due to the expenses, there's 5% left over of that income generated to be saved. And that $18 million of wealth, of all those days showing up to work to produce an income, there's 920 grand put away to show for it. Now, 920,000 seems like a large number until we start dissecting it a little further and say, well, one, what about inflation, right? Like inflation, meaning the cost of things go up over time. 35 years from now, 920,000 might feel like 400,000. And then second, if we're assuming an age of 65 here, again, assuming a 30-year-old couple works for 35 years, therefore they're 65 years old, that money needs to last potentially for 30 plus years into retirement. So if they're making 250 now, they only have about 4 years worth of their income put away, less than that. Uh, so we have to say, how can we make that green number larger? And one way we can do it, and one way my industry focuses a lot on, probably to a flaw is putting so much attention on it as the most important factor is, can we get a rate of return on this money? So in this example, you can imagine this, assume this person was putting money under their mattress. They were getting no money, they were getting no growth on their money, no rate of return, no compounding interest effect. But what if they were able to get a rate of return? And we can use a optimistic number here. I don't know, 8%. That's a common figure used for something like the S&P 500's return over a long period of time on average. And we can look at, before we had 920,000 with no rate of return. With a rate of return, now you're up to $3.6 million. Really awesome result. That's almost $3 million more wealth just by doing something more intelligent with our money. So that does teach us something. It's really important to get growth on our money. It's really important to let our money compound and be in investments for the long term. However, there's one problem with what I just did. I just picked a number and put it inside a calculator. There's really no certainty that that 8% will play out. It could be more and it could be less. Um, what we have to say with true financial planning is, what factors can we control? This is a little bit less of the fun stuff to talk about, but it's the important stuff. It's relatable to getting in shape. Like, you can either focus on the what exercises you are doing, or you can focus on getting yourself to the gym. If you show up to the gym one day a week and you have the best exercises in the world, you're probably not going to get in that great a shape. But if we're showing up 5 days a week, we can basically do the fundamentals and we'll be good. A little bit of a cheesy analogy there, but it can be relatable towards building wealth in that fact. Focusing on the fundamentals is so important. And what are the fundamentals here? What are the things we can control? It's what's underneath the iceberg. What if, through proper strategies and intelligent thinking, what if you're able to reduce tax exposure over time? Maybe through using different strategical retirement accounts, uh, dividend paying cash value life insurance, real estate, whatever it may be, to ultimately reduce some taxes. What if you're intelligent around your debt by, holding yourself accountable to responsible decisions? You keep your debt in check, and perhaps you have a little less debt over time. And what if you just spend a little less money? Maybe one less Uber Eats per week. Something, again, focusing on just putting away a little more money for ourselves. And by reducing these expenses, what happened here now? We increased savings. So this number that's up here, this 3.6 million, we reached that number when, again, we were earning 8% on our money and putting away 5%. What I want to show you here, in order to prove a very important fact, I'm going to assume that we get a less return on our money. This is not the goal. This is not to say our clients have been achieving low rates of return, but this is just to stress test what's more important, how much you save or what you're earning on your investments. So here we're going to look at a less return. Let's use something conservative like a 5% rate of return. But again, now we're saving more money. So before, we finished with 3.6 million by having an 8% rate of return with 5% savings rate. Now we're going to take a look at 5% rate of return with 20% savings rate. And what you can see here is more than double the wealth is created. So what's more important, where you put your money or how much you save? Both are very important. And the goal is to always put your money into very intelligent investments. But what I wanted to share with you here today, a piece of game-changing information, is if you can be a world-class saver, you will put yourself in an unbelievable position to obtain financial success. Now, what I'm going to do here is, what if we're able to do both, get great rates of return and save proper amounts of money, optimal amounts of wealth, saving 20% of what we earn, saying, you know what, every dollar I bring in, I'm going to throw away 20% for the future. What if that is also combined with that 8% rate of return? Again, not saying that's absolutely possible or predictable, but just to take a look here, $14.6 million of wealth. And we're not looking at ridiculous uh, predictions here. This is a 30-year-old couple putting away 20% of their household income and earning 8% on it over time, almost reaching that same $18 million they generated, getting back in their pocket to show for it. Now, I want you to notice something here. We've spoke a lot about the power of compounding of interest. Take a look at this curve, how it really starts taking off over time. Notice the last year it jumps from 13.3 million to 14.6 million. That's 1.3 million dollars of growth just in one year. That's because of the power of compounding. If you notice in the early years, the green is growing very slowly. That's kind of like the startup phase. Then there's a little bit of a growth phase, and then the ending is the takeoff phase, the rocket phase. We all only get one compounding curve, one exponential growth curve in our lifetime. It's our economic growth curve. And it's super important to take advantage of it. Again, we're looking at an example of someone having 35 years on the growth curve. The results would be much different if someone was to start putting away money much later in life, because every year you miss out on the growth curve, it doesn't come off the front of the curve, it comes off of the back end, off of these years of massive growth. So I want to show you an example here. This is what we can call the cost of procrastination. What if this same person, instead of having 35 years on the growth curve, which we're utilizing in this study period here, what if they started thinking about this stuff just 5 years later? And instead of 35 years, which again, we reached 14.6 million, they have 30 years on the growth curve. What's the results? $9.2 million, over $5 million difference in wealth just by delaying the compounding of interest curve by 5 years. Now, if you're past the point of being able to have 35 years on the growth curve, this message isn't here to disencourage you or make you feel bad for what you missed out on. You can always take advantage of intelligent financial strategies. The point is, wherever you're at, you want to make sure you're on this compounding curve. And you also want to make sure you understand the important principle of saving is an extremely important part of the financial process. Savings rate is more important than rate of return when it comes to investing. Um, Getting the gasoline into the car. You can have a Ferrari, but if it has no gas, it's not going anywhere, right? So we want to make sure we have a full tank combined with a great car, and so that we can have a nice track, nice path as we're headed towards our long-term wealth building goals.